The first time I saw the tire marks, I thought it was an accident. They cut across the edge of my lawn near the driveway, two shallow lines pressed into the grass like someone had turned too early and corrected too late. It wasn't deep, not enough to cause real damage, just enough to notice. So I ignored it. Because small things like that happen. Someone misjudges a turn. Someone backs out too wide. It's not intentional. It's just careless. But the second time it happened, it wasn't in the same place. It was further in, closer to the center of the lawn. And that's when it stopped feeling like a mistake. Because mistakes don't move inward. They repeat. They don't expand. I stood there for a minute, looking at the tracks, trying to figure out the angle, the direction, the timing. Not because I needed proof, because I needed to understand. And once you start paying attention like that, patterns show up fast. It happened again 2 days later. Same direction, same entry point, same exit. Only this time the grass didn't bounce back the same way. That's when it crossed the line from annoying to deliberate. So I started watching, not in an obvious way, just enough to notice who came and went, who drove slow, who cut corners. And it didn't take long. Late afternoon. Consistent timing. She pulled up the street like she always did, slowed slightly near my driveway, then instead of staying on the road, she turned early. Too early. Her front tires rolled right onto the edge of my lawn like it was part of the turn, like it belonged to the street, like it didn't matter. She didn't stop, didn't hesitate, just drove across it like she had done it 100 times before, then straightened out and continued on like nothing had happened. That told me everything. This wasn't accidental, this was routine. I walked over after she left and looked at the ground again. Fresh tracks. Deeper now, more defined, because repetition does that. It turns soft ground into something worn, something permanent. That same evening I went over to her house, knocked once, waited. She opened the door with the kind of expression that already assumes inconvenience. Yes, she said. I need you to stop driving across my lawn, I said. Direct, simple, no build-up. She blinked once, like she was processing whether or not this was even worth responding to. I'm not driving on your lawn, she replied. Flat, immediate, like the answer had already been decided. You are, I said. I've seen it. She leaned slightly against the doorframe. It's part of the corner, she said. Everyone uses it. Everyone. That word again. Used to justify something that isn't actually shared. It's not part of the road, I said. She shrugged. It's not a big deal, she replied. That was the moment it shifted. Because it wasn't about whether she was doing it. It was about whether she cared. And she didn't. You're damaging the grass, I said. It'll grow back, she replied. Calm, dismissive. Like the outcome didn't matter. Just the convenience. I looked at her for a second. Because there's always a point in a conversation where you realize it's not going to change anything. And this was it. You need to stay on the road, I said. She gave a small, almost amused smile. I'll try, she said. Not a promise, not a commitment, just something that sounds like agreement without actually being one. I nodded once and left, because pushing further wouldn't change anything. Not yet. The next day, I watched again. Same time, same approach, same turn. Right across the lawn, no hesitation, no adjustment, like the conversation had never happened. That's when I stopped thinking about asking, because asking only works when the other person is willing to respect the answer, and she wasn't. So I started thinking differently, not about stopping her directly, about changing the environment, because behavior follows the easiest path. And right now, my lawn was the easiest path. That needed to change. Over the next few days, the tracks got worse, deeper, wider. The grass didn't just bend anymore. It broke. Patches started thinning out. Soil started showing through. And once that happens, it doesn't fix itself quickly. It becomes a habit in the ground, just like it had become a habit for her. I considered putting up a sign. Simple, clear. But signs only work for people who read them. And more importantly, respect them. I had already seen how she handled that. So instead, I did something else. I measured the area, not roughly, exactly, the entry point, the angle of the turn, the path her tires followed every single time. Because if something happens repeatedly, it becomes predictable. And predictable problems are the easiest ones to solve. I didn't rush it, didn't react emotionally, just planned, because whatever I did next needed to work the first time. And more importantly, it needed to work without me being there. Because the goal wasn't to confront her again. The goal was to make the behavior stop. Completely. Without discussion. Without warning. And without giving her the option to ignore it. A few days later, Everything was ready. Nothing visible had changed. The lawn looked the same. The path was still there, still inviting, still easy. But underneath, it wasn't the same anymore. Because sometimes the best solution is the one no one sees coming. I didn't change anything on the surface. That was the whole point, because if it looked different, she'd adjust. And I didn't want adjustment. I wanted interruption, the kind that stops a pattern immediately. So the lawn stayed exactly the same worn path, same flattened strip where her tires had been cutting through, same open space that made it look like the easiest way to turn. But underneath, it was different. The system wasn't complicated. It didn't need to be. It was precise, targeted, built around one thing only: timing. Because she didn't just drive across randomly. She did it at the same time almost every day. Same approach, same turn, same exact moment where her front tires crossed the edge. That's where everything was focused. The first day it was ready, I didn't watch from the yard. I stayed inside, just enough distance to let it happen naturally. Because the effectiveness of something like this depends on surprise. And surprise only works once. Late afternoon came around, right on schedule. I heard the engine before I saw anything. Same sound, same slow approach. Then silence for a second as she slowed down near the driveway. That was the moment, the point where everything always happened the same way. And then, it didn't. Her front tires rolled onto the lawn, exactly like before. Same angle, same path. But this time, the lawn responded. Not loudly, not dramatically, just instantly. The sprinkler activated the second her tires crossed the line. A sharp burst of water shot upward from the ground right where the path began, catching the front of her car before she even realized what was happening. For half a second, she didn't react, because it didn't make sense. It wasn't expected. Then the second sprinkler kicked in, then the third, timed perfectly along the path she always took, each one activating just as she moved forward, turning what had been a shortcut into something else entirely. A direct interruption. She hit the brakes. Hard. Too late to avoid the first spray. Not fast enough to escape the second. Water hit the side of the car, the windshield, the front tires, splashing up against the body in quick, controlled bursts. Not damaging, not excessive. Just enough. Enough to make it clear. This wasn't random. This wasn't weather. This wasn't something she could ignore. She sat there for a second, completely still. Engine running. Wipers suddenly kicking on as water streaked across the glass, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Then she reversed. Slow at first, then quicker. Backing off the lawn. Back onto the road where she should have been in the first place. The moment her tires left the grass, the system shut off. Immediate, clean, like nothing had happened, except it had. She stayed there for a few seconds, parked just outside the driveway, looking at the yard, then at her car, then back at the yard again. Because now the space she had treated like an extension of the road had responded, and not in a way she could dismiss, not in a way she could argue with, just directly. She didn't get out. Didn't come to the door, didn't try to confront anything. She just drove off, slower than usual, more controlled, more aware. That was the first time, and the first time is always the most important, because it sets the tone for everything that follows. The next day, I watched from inside again. Same time, same approach, but this time, she didn't turn as early. She slowed down, looked at the lawn, then adjusted her angle. Slightly, not enough to fully avoid it, because habits don't break instantly. They resist. Her front tire touched the edge again, just barely, and the system responded. Not fully, just one sprinkler this time, a quick burst, a warning, immediate, precise. She pulled back instantly, didn't even try to continue, corrected her steering and stayed on the road. That was new, because before, there had been no correction, no hesitation. Now there was, and that's how behavior changes. Not all at once, but in small, forced adjustments. Over the next few days, the pattern shifted. Less intrusion, more distance. Each time she got close, the system responded just enough to remind her. Not aggressively, not constantly, just consistently, that the space wasn't available anymore. And consistency is what makes something stick. By the end of the week, she wasn't touching the lawn at all, not even by accident. Her turns were wider, more deliberate, fully on the road, exactly where they should have been from the beginning. But that wasn't the end of it, because people don't like being corrected like that, especially when they don't control the correction. They look for another way, another angle, another solution that puts them back in control. And I had a feeling. That's exactly what she was about to try next. For a few days after the sprinkler started doing its job, everything settled. No tire marks, no shortcuts, no accidental turns cutting across the grass. Just normal use of the road, exactly the way it should have been from the beginning. If it had ended there, It would have been simple. Problem solved. No further action needed. But it didn't end there. Because for someone like her, changing behavior doesn't mean accepting it. It means looking for a way around it. And that showed up exactly how I expected. A notice, placed neatly at the edge of my driveway again. Different from before, more formal. HOA letterhead. Carefully worded, I picked it up and read it once, then again. Improper installation of automated water system causing potential disturbance to community use. Community use. That phrase stood out immediately, because it implied something that wasn't true, that my lawn was somehow shared space, that her driving across it had been normal, accepted, allowed, which it wasn't. The notice requested that the system be adjusted or removed to prevent further inconvenience. Inconvenience. That was what it had been reduced to. Not property damage. Not repeated disregard. Just inconvenience. I didn't respond right away. Didn't call. Didn't argue. Because this wasn't about interpretation anymore. It was about clarity, and clarity doesn't come from reacting. It comes from showing. A few days later, the HOA scheduled a meeting. Not unusual, not dramatic, just structured, predictable. Exactly the kind of setting where she thought this would work. Because in a controlled environment, it's easier to frame things a certain way, to present them as reasonable, necessary, justified. I went, sat down, waited. She was there, of course. Same posture, same composed expression, like the situation had already been decided. When the topic came up, she spoke first, explaining how the sprinkler system was creating disruption, how it was triggering unexpectedly, and how it could affect normal movement through the area. Normal movement, that phrase again, built on the assumption that the lawn was part of the route, that crossing it had been acceptable, expected. I let her finish, didn't interrupt, because the more complete her explanation was, the clearer the response would be. When it was my turn, I didn't argue, didn't challenge her directly. I just explained. Calm. Simple. The system was installed entirely within my property. It activated only when something entered that property. And most importantly, it had never activated when someone stayed on the road. That last part mattered, because it removed all ambiguity. The system wasn't random. It wasn't disruptive to normal behavior. It responded only to one specific action. An action that shouldn't have been happening in the first place. Then I showed the footage. Short clips. Clear angles. Her car turning early, crossing onto the lawn, multiple times, before the system, and then after. The difference was immediate. Before, the behavior was consistent, uninterrupted. After, it stopped. Completely. No more tracks, no more damage, just normal driving. That shift told the whole story, without needing anything else. The room went quiet. Not tense, not uncomfortable, just settled. Because once something is clear, there's nothing left to debate. One of the board members leaned forward slightly. So the system only activates when someone enters your lawn? They asked. Yes, I said. And it hasn't activated when people stay on the road? No. Another pause. Then a nod. That was it. That was the moment everything changed. Because the argument she had built depended on the idea that the system was a problem. But the evidence showed something else entirely. It wasn't causing an issue. It was preventing one. The decision came quickly after that. No violation on my part, no requirement to remove or adjust anything, and a clear reminder issued about respecting property boundaries. Not general, not vague, specific, directed. After the meeting, there wasn't much left to say. People stood up, left, moved on, because the situation had resolved itself. Not through conflict, not through escalation, just through clarity. I didn't talk to her afterward, didn't need to, because the outcome had already said everything. Over the next few weeks, nothing happened. No new notices, no complaints, no attempts to approach the yard. Her driving changed completely. Wider turns, more space, no contact with the grass at all. Like the lawn had become something solid, something not worth testing again. And over time, the damage started to fade. Grass grew back, the lines softened, the path disappeared, until it looked the way it had before any of this started, clean, undisturbed, exactly the way it was supposed to be. I saw her once more after that. Driving past, same route, same timing, but different behavior. She stayed fully on the road, didn't slow down near the edge, didn't even glance at the lawn, just passed by, like it had never been an option. And that told me everything. Because in the end, this wasn't about stopping her directly. It was about removing the opportunity, making the behavior impossible to ignore. And once that happens, people don't keep pushing. They adjust, they move on, and they don't come back to it. The sprinkler never had to do anything more than that. It didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't confront. It just responded. Consistently. Every time. Until there was nothing left to respond to. How did you like the story? Please like, share, and subscribe my YouTube channel for more interesting HOA stories.